The champagne glass shattered against marble, and Sienna Clark realized she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. "You think you can just walk away?" Dominic Ashford's voice cut through crystalline chaos, raw and desperate in a way she'd never heard before. "After everything, after this?" The grand Ashford estate glittered around them like a palace of lies. 200 guests mingled below in the ballroom, their laughter drifting up the curved staircase where Sienna stood frozen, her emerald gown torn at the hem, mascara streaking her flushed cheeks. Christmas Eve, the night that was supposed to seal their perfect charade, had instead ripped everything wide open. Everything. Her laugh came out broken, bitter. "You mean the pretending? The acting? The contract that said I'd smile and hold your hand and play the devoted wife for 3 weeks while you secured your inheritance." Dominic moved toward her, his tuxedo jacket discarded somewhere in the chaos of the last hour, his white shirt partially unbuttoned, revealing the rapid rise and fall of his chest. God, even now, especially now, he looked like every fantasy she'd ever tried to suppress during those late nights at the office. "That's not fair." His dark eyes blazed with something fierce and unguarded. "You know it became more than that. You know it, Sienna." "Do I?" She backed against the railing, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. "Because all I know is what you told me 3 weeks ago in your office. It's purely professional, Miss Clark. A business arrangement. No emotions, no complications, no strings. Those were your exact words, Dominic. Your one condition." Below them, someone started playing "Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas" on the grand piano. The irony twisted like a knife. That was before he stopped himself, jaw clenching, and she watched him wage some internal war she couldn't decipher. When had she learned to read his expressions like this? When had his pain become something she could feel in her own chest? "Before what?" she demanded, her voice rising. "Before you kissed me in front of your family? Before you held me while we danced? Before you whispered my name like—" She choked on the words, pressing her palm against her chest where her heart threatened to explode. "It doesn't matter. None of it was real. That was the deal." "The deal," he repeated, and something in his tone made her look up sharply. He'd crossed the remaining distance between them, close enough now that she could smell his cologne, that intoxicating blend of cedar, and something uniquely him that had haunted her dreams for weeks. "What if I want to renegotiate?" The world tilted. "What?" "The condition." His hand lifted, hovering near her face but not quite touching, as if he was afraid she'd shatter like the champagne glass scattered across the floor. "What if I was wrong? What if I'm tired pretending that this is all fake, when every moment with you feels more real than anything I've ever known?" Sienna's breath caught. This couldn't be happening. Not now. Not like this. Not when she'd already— "Mr. Ashford?" A woman's voice echoed up the staircase. Veronica, his ex-fiancée. The reason they were in this mess in the first place. "Your grandmother is asking for you and your wife. She wants to make the announcement about the trust." The spell broke. Reality came crashing back with the force of a freight train. "I can't do this," Sienna whispered, gathering her torn skirt in her fists. "I can't go down there and keep lying. Not to them. Not to myself." "Sienna, don't." She held up her hand, stopping him. "You want to know what your real mistake was, Dominic? It wasn't the contract or the conditions or any of this insane plan. It was thinking I could spend 3 weeks falling for you and then just walk away unscathed when it was over." The confession hung between them, raw and exposed. His expression transformed, shock melting into something that looked almost like hope, almost like agony. "You fell for me? It doesn't matter." But her voice betrayed her, shaking with barely suppressed emotion. "Because in 10 minutes, you're going to go downstairs, collect your $30 million trust fund, and I'm going to disappear back into my real life. Back to being your assistant who filed your papers and scheduled your meetings and was stupid enough to say yes when her billionaire boss asked her to pretend to be his wife for Christmas. Mr. Ashford?" Veronica's voice came again, closer now. "They're waiting." The grandfather clock in the hall began to chime. Midnight approached. Christmas Day. The moment when everything would either solidify into permanence or dissolve into nothing. Dominic's hand finally made contact, his fingers curving around her wrist with desperate gentleness. What if I told you I don't want the money? What if I told you that somewhere between our first fake smile and tonight, I stopped acting? Sienna's eyes burned with unshed tears. Then I'd say you're 3 weeks too late with the truth. She pulled away, but he followed, his voice dropping to that rough whisper that always unraveled her. Sienna, please, let me explain. Let me tell you why I asked you. Let me tell you about the real condition. The one I never said out loud, because I was too much of a coward to admit what I already felt. What you felt. The tears spilled over now. When you hired me 2 years ago and barely noticed I existed. When you dated Victoria and Sophia in half of Manhattan, while I stayed late organizing your social calendar. When exactly did you start feeling something, Dominic? The questions cut through the air like accusations, like prayers, like desperate pleas for him to give a reason. Any reason. To believe this was more than a fantasy she'd been living. Mr. Ashford. Veronica appeared at the top of the stairs. Her perfect red dress and perfect blonde hair and perfect smile, all calculated precision. Your grandmother is quite insistent. She's already had 2 glasses of champagne, and is threatening to change her will if you keep her waiting. But Dominic didn't even glance at her. His eyes stayed locked on Sienna's, burning with an intensity that made her knees weak. 6 months ago, he said quietly. That's when... Sienna's breath hitched. What? You asked when I started feeling something. 6 months ago. The Nakamura merger. Do you remember? How could she forget? They'd worked 70-hour weeks for 2 months straight. She practically lived at the office, surviving on coffee and takeout, learning every detail of business because she was determined to be indispensable, to prove her worth, to... You brought me coffee at 3 a.m, Dominic continued, his voice rough with memory. But it wasn't just coffee. You'd noticed I'd been rubbing my temples all night, so you'd added that peppermint oil that helps with my headaches. And you printed out the revised contracts with the corrections I'd mentioned in passing 6 hours earlier, organized in the exact order I needed them. And when I looked up to thank you, you were standing by the window, looking out at the city, and the sunrise was just starting to break through the darkness. She remembered. God help her. She remembered every detail. You turned around, he whispered, stepping closer, and smiled at me. Not your professional smile. Not your efficient assistant smile. Just you, tired and real, and so beautiful it stopped my heart. And you said, we're going to win this, Mr. Ashford. I can feel it. And in that moment, I knew. Knew what? The words barely escaped her constricted throat. That I was in serious trouble. That my reliable, brilliant, indispensable assistant had somehow become the one person I couldn't stop thinking about. The one person I want to see first thing every morning and last thing every night. The one person who made me believe that maybe, just maybe, I could be more than the cold, calculating businessman everyone thought I was. Sienna's world spun. But you never said anything. You never. Because you worked for me, he cut in, frustration and longing warring in his expression. Because I had built my entire career on control and professionalism and clear boundaries. Because I knew the power imbalance made it impossible. And because I was terrified that if I told you how I felt you'd leave, and I'd lose the best thing in my life, even if I could never really have you. So you asked me to fake marry you instead? The hurt bled through despite her efforts to contain it. That was your solution? No. He moved closer still, until only inches separated them. That was my mistake. My grandmother's ultimatum about the trust. Get married by Christmas or lose everything. It gave me an excuse. A way to have you close without risking rejection. But the condition, Sienna, the real condition I never voiced, was what? Her hands trembled against her sides. That I'd try to make you fall for me. That I'd use these 3 weeks to show you who I really am beneath the suits and the boardrooms. That maybe, just maybe, by the end of Christmas, you want to stay, not because of a contract, but because you've fallen for me too. The confession detonated between them like a bomb. Mr. Ashford, Veronica's voice had gone shrill with impatience. This is ridiculous. Your grandmother is going to have to wait. Dominic said without breaking eye contact with Sienna. Because I'm not going down there until Sienna tells me if I've lost her forever or if there's still a chance. But before Sienna could form words around the chaos of emotions storming through her chest, a new voice joined the fray. Dominic? Sienna? His grandmother, Eleanor Ashford, stood at the base of the stairs, leaning on her diamond-studded cane, her steel-gray eyes sharp despite the late hour in champagne. I think it's time we all had a conversation. A real one. No more games. No more pretending. Come down here. Both of you. Now. The command in her voice left no room for argument. Sienna and Dominic exchanged a loaded glance. So much unsaid, so much hanging in the balance, before slowly, reluctantly, descending the staircase together. But as Sienna's heel hit the bottom step, Eleanor's gaze pinned her with unexpected gentleness. You love him, the old woman said simply. Not a question. A statement. Sienna's carefully constructed walls crumbled. Yes. And you? Eleanor turned to Dominic. Love her? More than I knew was possible, he answered without hesitation. Eleanor nodded once, satisfied. Good. Then perhaps we can finally stop this charade and deal with the real problem. Real problem? Dominic frowned. Grandmother, what are you talking about? But Eleanor just smiled, that mysterious, knowing smile that suggested she'd been orchestrating something far more complex than any of them had realized. The trust, darling boy. Did you really think I'd give you $30 million just for getting married? I'm many things, but a fool isn't one of them. I knew from the moment you announced your sudden engagement to your assistant that something was amiss. Sienna's stomach dropped. You knew. My dear girl, I didn't build an empire by being oblivious to human nature. But what I needed to know, what I've been testing these past 3 weeks, was whether you two would be brave enough to stop hiding behind contract and conditions and admit what was really happening between you. The pieces clicked into place with stunning clarity. The family dinners, the couple's activities, the pointed questions. Eleanor had been watching, waiting, orchestrating. So the money, Dominic started, was always yours, Eleanor finished. But not because you got married. Because you found something infinitely more valuable than wealth. You found someone who sees you, truly sees you, and loves you anyway. Someone who challenges you, supports you, makes you better. That's the real inheritance I wanted you to have. Sienna felt tears streaming down her face now, unstoppable. Mrs. Ashford. Eleanor, please. We're family now. Or we will be, once you two stop being stubborn and figure out that real love doesn't come with conditions. It just is. The ballroom had gone silent. Every guest, every family member, stood watching this drama unfold. Dominic turned to Sienna, his hand finding hers with trembling urgency. I know I've done this backward. I know I've hurt you by hiding behind contracts and fear. But I'm done pretending. I'm done with conditions. Sienna Clark, Wait, she interrupted, her voice surprisingly steady despite the tears. Before you say whatever you're about to say, I need you to understand something. His expression went carefully neutral, bracing for rejection. 3 weeks ago, when you came into my office and asked me to be your fake wife, I said yes for all the wrong reasons. Because you were my boss. Because the money was life-changing. Because I'd spent 2 years building walls around what I felt for you, and I thought I could handle a little pretending. She took a shaking breath. But somewhere between that first fake kiss and tonight, somewhere between meeting your family and decorating the Christmas tree and dancing in the snow, I stopped acting too. And it terrified me. Because falling for you was never part of the plan. Falling for you meant risking everything. And now, he asked, his voice barely audible, now I'm standing here, in a torn dress, with my heart completely exposed, realizing that the biggest risk isn't loving you. It's walking away and spending the rest of my life wondering what if. The hope that bloomed across his face was devastating in its intensity. So if you're done with conditions, Sienna continued, then so am I. No more contracts. No more pretending. Just us, figuring this out together, making all the mistakes and taking all the chances that real love requires. Dominic's hands cupped her face with achingly gentle reverence. I love you, Sienna. Not because you're convenient, or because you make my life easier, or because of anything practical. I love you because you're you. Brilliant and stubborn and compassionate, and real in a world full of people who are anything but. I love you too, she whispered. Even though you're impossible and controlling and terrible at expressing emotions without a PowerPoint presentation. His laugh was pure relief, pure joy. I can make you a PowerPoint about my feelings if it helps. Shut up and kiss me. So he did, and as Dominic's lips met hers, soft and desperate and achingly tender, the ballroom erupted in applause. Christmas lights twinkled overhead. Snow began to fall outside the windows, and somewhere in the chaos, Eleanor Ashford smiled and raised her champagne glass in silent victory. But this was only the beginning of their story. To understand how they'd arrived at this moment, how an arrangement born of desperation and deception had transformed into something real, we need to go back. Back to where it all started. Back to 3 weeks earlier, when Sienna Clark's ordinary life was about to be turned completely upside down. The coffee was cold, the files were endless, and Sienna Clark was definitely not thinking about her boss's hands. Except she absolutely was. Miss Clark. Dominic's voice crackled through the intercom, making her jump and nearly knock over her third cup of coffee that morning. Could you come to my office, please? Of course, Mr. Ashford. She grabbed her tablet and smoothed down her navy pencil skirt, checking her reflection in the dark computer screen. Professional. Put together. Absolutely not a woman who'd spent the better part of the morning remembering how those same hands had looked signing contracts, gesturing during presentations, gripping his pen with focused intensity. God, she needed to get a grip. The executive floor of Ashford Industries hummed with its usual pre-holiday chaos. It was December 3rd, and Manhattan glittered with premature Christmas cheer. Storefronts wrapped in lights, Salvation Army bells ringing on every corner, tourists cluttering Fifth Avenue with their wide-eyed wonder. Sienna had no time for wonder. She had performance reviews to complete, Q4 reports to finalize, and exactly 23 days until her mother's medical bills came due. Again, she knocked twice on Dominic's door, their established signal, and entered without waiting for permission. The office was exactly what you'd expect from a 34-year-old billionaire who'd inherited his father's company at 25 and tripled its value within a decade. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, minimalist furniture in shades of gray and chrome, abstract art that probably cost more than her annual salary. And Dominic himself, standing by those windows, his back to her, shoulders tense in a way that immediately set off her internal alarm system. Something was wrong. "Mr. Ashford?" she ventured. "Is everything all right?" He turned, and the expression on his face made her breath catch. Not angry, not stressed. Something else. Something that looked almost like defeat? Impossible. Dominic Ashford didn't do defeat. "Close the door, please." The formal tone sent a chill down her spine. In 2 years of working together, 2 years of late nights and early mornings, of learning his preferences and anticipate his needs, of becoming what her best friend Tessa called terrifyingly indispensable, he'd never sounded quite like this. She closed the door. "I need to ask you something," he said, moving away from the window to lean against his desk. The morning light caught the sharp angles of his face, the dark stubble he'd apparently forgotten to shave, the shadows under his eyes that suggested he'd slept as poorly as she had. "And I need you to hear me out completely before you respond." Her heart started doing strange acrobatics in her chest. "Okay, what do you know about my family?" The question threw her. Your grandmother is Eleanor Ashford, the original founder's daughter-in-law. Your parents died in a plane crash when you were 23. You have a younger sister, Natasha, who lives in London. Your grandmother controls the family trust and most of the company shares. And my personal life? Sienna fought the urge to fidget. You prefer to keep it private. I've scheduled dates with various women over the past 2 years, but nothing serious or long-term. You attended Victoria Carmichael's charity gala last month as her plus one. Before that, you dated Sophia Zhang for approximately 6 months, but that ended last spring. Something flickered in his expression. Very thorough. It's my job to be thorough. Yes, your job. He pushed off the desk, moving to pour himself water from the crystal decanter, his movements carefully controlled. That's actually what I want to talk to you about. A job. An unusual one. Warning bells clanged in her head. I'm listening. My grandmother, he began, turning back to face her, has decided that at 78, she's tired of waiting for me to settle down and produce heirs, as she so delicately put it. She's issued an ultimatum. Get married by Christmas, or she transfers controlling interest in the family trust charity. Sienna blinked. Married? By Christmas? That's 3 weeks away. 23 days, to be precise. That's insane. That's my grandmother. His mouth curved in something too bitter to be called a smile. She believes I become too focused on work, too isolated, too much like my father before the accident. She wants me to experience real connection, or some similar sentimental nonsense. The word stung more than they should have. Was that how he saw connection? Relationships? Sentimental nonsense? What does this have to do with me? But even as she asked, a terrible suspicion began forming. Dominic set down his glass with deliberate care. The trust is worth approximately $30 million. It's separate from my business holdings, inherited directly from my grandfather, and my grandmother has complete discretion over its dispersal. If I don't comply, I lose it. All of it. Surely you don't need. The money itself isn't the point, he interrupted. It's the principle. It's my inheritance. My family legacy. And more practically, I've already pledged a significant portion of it to fund a children's hospital wing my mother designed before she died. If I lose the trust, that project dies with it. Sienna's heart constricted. She knew about his mother's unfinished project. She discovered the plans in his bottom desk drawer 6 months ago, while organizing files, had seen the worn edges suggesting how often he looked at them. I'm sorry, she said softly. That's an impossible situation. Which brings me to my proposal. He straightened, and suddenly he was all business, the version of himself she knew best, composed and confident and slightly intimidating. I need a wife. Temporarily. Just long enough to satisfy my grandmother's ultimatum. Secure the trust, and ensure my mother's hospital gets built. The room tilted. You want to hire someone to fake marry you. Not someone. His dark eyes locked onto hers with laser focus. You. The word hung between them like a grenade with the pin pulled. Me, she repeated stupidly. Think about it logically. You already know everything about me. My schedule, my preferences, my business. You're intelligent, professional, capable of handling high-pressure situations. My grandmother has met you several times and seems to find you tolerable. How flattering, she managed, but her voice sounded distant, disconnected from her body. Dominic continued as if presenting a business proposal. I'm prepared to offer you $500,000. Half up front, half when the arrangement concludes. The marriage would last 3 weeks, long enough to satisfy my grandmother and secure the trust. Then a quiet divorce after the holidays, with a generous severance package and excellent references for whatever career path you choose next. $500,000. The number ricocheted through her skull. $500,000 would cover her mother's medical bills, the experimental treatment her insurance refused to pay for, the mortgage, everything. It would mean breathing room, security, hope. It would mean selling 3 weeks of her life to pretend to be in love with a man she'd spent 2 years trying not to actually fall for. This is crazy, she whispered. This is business. This is illegal. Marriage fraud. It is remarkably difficult to prove when both parties are consenting adults who follow through on their commitment. We'd be legally married, live together during the arrangement, attend family functions. Nothing fraudulent about it. Sienna's mind spun. Why me, really? You could hire an actual actress. Someone trained in deception. For the first time, something unguarded flickered across his face. Because I trust you. Because you're the only person in my life who's seen me at my worst. Exhausted, stressed, angry, and never tried to manipulate or use it against me. Because... He paused, seeming to choose his next words with unusual care. Because I think we could make this work without anyone getting hurt. The last part landed like a blade between her ribs. Without anyone getting hurt. Because, of course, he didn't see the danger. He didn't know that she spent countless nights replaying innocent moments. His hand briefly touching hers when passing documents. His rare smiles when she anticipated his needs before he voiced them. The way he sometimes looked at her when he thought she wasn't paying attention. He didn't know that pretending to be his wife would be the most dangerous thing she'd ever done. There would be conditions, he added, pulling out his phone and swiping to what looked like a prepared document. I've drafted a contract outlining expectations, boundaries, and conditions, she interrupted, latching onto the word like a lifeline. What kind of conditions? Professional boundaries maintained throughout. Separate bedrooms. Public displays of affection as needed for authenticity, but nothing more. No emotional entanglement. When the 3 weeks end, we return to our previous relationship, employer and employee, or part ways professionally if you prefer. Clean, simple, mutually beneficial. No emotional entanglement. The phrase gutted her. I need time to think, she said. Of course. I understand this is unexpected. Unexpected? Her laugh came out sharp, bordering on hysterical. Unexpected is finding out there's no milk for coffee. This is insane. But even as she said it, her mind was already calculating. The medical bills. Her mother's wan face during their last video call. The collection notices stuffed in her desk drawer. The way she'd been living on ramen and hope for 6 months. Unable to catch up no matter how many extra hours she worked. $500,000. I'll give you 48 hours, Dominic said, his voice softening fractionally. And Sienna, I wouldn't ask if I didn't think you were capable of handling this. You're the strongest person I know. The compliment hit like a punch. He had no right to say things like that. No right to make her feel seen and valued when he was simultaneously reducing their potential relationship to a business transaction. I'll let you know, she managed, turning toward the door before he could see the tears threatening to spill. Sienna? She stopped but didn't turn around. For what it's worth, I really am sorry. About all of it. She left without responding, her heels clicking against marble as she speed-walked back to her desk, barely making it to the bathroom before the first sob escaped. This was impossible. Insane. Completely unthinkable. And yet, her phone buzzed. A text from the hospital billing department. Final notice. Payment required within 30 days, or will be forced to discontinue your mother's care. Sienna stared at the message until the words blurred. 48 hours, he'd said. She had a feeling she'd barely need 48 minutes to make the worst decision of her life. 24 hours later. You're gonna do it, aren't you? Tessa Chin sat across from Sienna in their favorite coffee shop, her expression hovering between concern and something that looked suspiciously like excitement. At 29, Tessa was everything Sienna wasn't. Spontaneous, fearless, the kind of person who backpacked through Southeast Asia on a whim and came back with a tattoo of a dragon and stories that made Sienna's organized life seem impossibly dull. I don't know, Sienna lied, stirring her latte for the 5th time. Liar, you got that look. What look? The one where you've already made a pro-con list, color-coded it, and determined that the pros slightly outweigh the cons even though your gut is screaming that this is a terrible idea. Sienna set down her spoon. Am I that predictable? You're that practical, which is normally one of your best qualities, except when you're using practicality to avoid dealing with your actual feelings. Tessa leaned forward, her dark eyes serious. See, you've been half in love with this guy for how long? I'm not. 2 years. You've been not so secretly pining for 2 years. And now he's asking you to play house and pretend to be his wife? This isn't going to end well. It's not real, Sienna protested, even as her heart contracted. It's just business. He's offering $500,000 for 3 weeks of acting. That's more than I'd make in 10 years. My mom needs. Your mom would rather you be happy than comfortable. You know she would. Easy for her to say from a hospital bed when someone else is paying the bills. The words came out harsher than intended. Sienna pressed her fingers to her temples. I'm sorry. I don't know what to do. Tessa reached across the table, squeezing her hand. What does your gut say? That I'm about to make a huge mistake. And your heart. Sienna closed her eyes. Her heart said that 3 weeks of pretending to be Dominic's wife would be simultaneously the best and worst thing that ever happened to her. Her heart said that she'd already been imagining what it might be like. Waking up beside him, attending family dinners, stealing kisses under mistletoe even if they weren't real. Her heart was an idiot. My heart says I should probably run screaming in the opposite direction. But you won't. No, Sienna admitted quietly. I won't. Because the truth was, she'd already decided. Somewhere between Dominic's proposal and this moment, sitting in a coffee shop watching snow dust the Manhattan streets. She'd made her choice. She was going to say yes. Not just for the money, though God knew she needed it. Not just for her mother, though that was reason enough. She was going to say yes because some reckless part of her, the part she usually kept locked away beneath spreadsheets and sensible shoes, wanted to know what it felt like, even if it was fake, even if it would break her heart. She wanted 3 weeks of pretending that Dominic Ashford loved her, even if she'd spend the rest of her life trying to forget. 6 hours later. I'll do it. Dominic looked up from his computer screen, his expression carefully neutral, but Sienna caught the flash of relief before he masked it. You're sure? No. Yes. I'll have the legal department draw up the contracts immediately. I have conditions too. That stopped him. He leaned back in his chair, studying her with those dark, assessing eyes. I'm listening. Sienna pulled out the list she'd been refining all day, her hand steadier than she felt. First, the payment. I want the full amount in escrow before we proceed. If you back out, I still get paid. Agreed. Second, complete medical confidentiality. No one can know about my mother's condition. As far as your family is concerned, I'm doing this because you fell desperately in love with your workaholic boss and couldn't resist when he finally noticed you. The words were light, teasing, but something in his tone made her stomach flip. Sure, that. Done. What else? Third, after this is over, if I choose to leave the company, you provide not just references but active assistance in finding new employment. I want introductions, recommendations, the works. Of course. And fourth, she hesitated, then forced herself to continue. No one can ever know this was fake. Not your grandmother, not your sister, not the press. We maintain the fiction permanently. I won't be known as the woman you paid to marry you. Something shifted in his expression. Protecting your reputation? Protecting my future. I can handle people thinking I was your wife. I can't handle them thinking I was your prostitute. His jaw tightened. That's not what this is. Isn't it? You're paying me to provide girlfriend services. I'm paying you to help me solve a problem, while helping you solve yours. There's no sex, no. I know. She cut him off, feeling her cheeks heat. I know, but that's how people would see it. So this stays secret. Forever. A long moment passed. Then, you have my word. No one will ever know. Then I'm in. Dominic stood, moving around the desk to stand before her. He extended his hand, and she stared at it for a moment. Elegant fingers, neat nails, the slight calluses that suggested he wasn't just a man who lived behind a desk. The hand that would wear a wedding ring matched to hers. The hand that would touch her, hold her, make 1,000 intimate gestures that would be witnessed and photographed and remembered. The hand that would never really be hers. She took it. His grip was firm, warm, and lasted exactly 3 seconds longer than professional required. Partners, then, he said softly. Partners, she echoed. And try not to think about how the word made her ache with longing for something she could never actually have. 3 days later, the engagement. The ring was obscene. Sienna stared at the 3-carat emerald-cut diamond surrounded by smaller stones, glittering against black velvet like captured starlight. It probably cost more than her entire existence to date. It was my grandmother's, Dominic said, watching her reaction. Not Eleanor's. My mother's mother. She'd want it worn by someone who, well, someone like you. They were in a private jeweler shop in Midtown, the kind of place where you need an appointment and a trust fund just to walk through the door. The elderly jeweler had tactfully withdrawn to give them privacy, leaving them alone in the elegant showroom. It's beautiful, Sienna whispered, because she couldn't say what she was really thinking. That she dreamed of this moment 100 times in weak moments. Imagine Dominic proposing for real. Imagine feeling joy instead of this complicated tangle of desire and grief. May I? She nodded, extending her left hand. It trembled slightly. Dominic's fingers were gentle as he slid the ring onto her finger, his thumb brushing against her palm in a gesture that felt almost tender. The ring fit perfectly, because of course he'd somehow figure out her size without asking. There, he said quietly. Now it's official. Official, right, because they'd signed the contracts that morning. Transferred the first payment into her account, set the timeline in motion. In 18 days, they'd marry in a small ceremony at his grandmother's estate. They'd spend Christmas together as a newly married couple. And then after New Year's, they'd begin the quiet process of dissolving everything. We should practice, she said abruptly. He raised an eyebrow. Practice? Selling this. Being convincing. Your grandmother isn't stupid. Neither is your family. If we're going to pull this off, we need to look like a couple who actually wants to be together. Understanding flickered across his face. You want to rehearse affection. I want not get caught in a lie that could destroy both our reputations. She pulled her hand back, the ring feeling heavy and foreign. When did we start dating? How did it happen? What's our story? Dominic considered this, then gestured to the velvet bench against the wall. Sit. Let's figure this out. They sat, close but not touching, and for the next hour, they crafted their fiction. They'd been secretly dating for 6 months. They decided. It started during the Nakamura merger, those long nights, that moment with the coffee and sunrise. He'd kissed her in his office at dawn, unable to help himself. She'd kissed him back. They'd agreed to keep it quiet to avoid office gossip. But the feelings had only grown stronger. The proposal happened last weekend. He'd taken her to the restaurant where they had their first real date, Le Bernardin, Sienna suggested, because she knew it was his favorite. He'd gotten down on one knee between the appetizer and the entree, and she'd said yes before he could finish asking. It was a good story. Believable. Romantic enough to satisfy his sentimental grandmother without being so dramatic as to invite skepticism. It was also, Sienna thought with an ache in her chest, exactly how she would have wanted it to happen for real. We should practice touching, Dominic said, pulling her from her thoughts. What? You flinch every time I get close. That's gonna raise questions. He shifted on the bench, angling toward her. We need to be comfortable with casual intimacy. Holding hands. My arm around your waist. That sort of thing. He was right. She knew he was right. But the thought of his hands on her, even platonically, made her pulse spike. Okay, she managed. How do we? His hand found hers, fingers lacing through hers with practiced ease. The touch sent electricity racing up her arm. Like this, he said quietly. Natural. Easy. Like we've done it 1,000 times. But they hadn't. In 2 years of working together, they'd barely touched beyond accidental brushes and professional handshakes. This was uncharted territory, dangerous and intoxicating. Try leaning against me, he suggested. Like you're tired, seeking comfort. Sienna hesitated, then let herself shift closer, her shoulder pressing against his chest, her head near the curve of his neck. He smelled like cedar and something crisp, his cologne, the one she'd ordered for him countless times without ever admitting she'd memorized the scent. His arm came around her shoulders, holding her gently. Better, he murmured, and she felt the words rumble through his chest. More natural. But nothing about this felt natural. It felt staged and perfect and heartbreaking all at once. Dominic, she whispered. What if we can't pull this off? What if your grandmother sees through us? His arm tightened fractionally. Then we deal with it together. That's what partners do. Partners. There was that word again, simultaneously perfect and devastating. The jeweler cleared his throat from the doorway, tactfully announcing his return. They sprang apart like guilty teenagers. Shall I box the ring, Mr. Ashford? No, Dominic said, his eyes on Sienna. She'll wear it. Starting now. And so Sienna Clark walked out of that jewelry store, wearing an engagement ring worth more than her car, her hand clasped in Dominic Ashford's, playing the role of the happy bride-to-be. The scary part was how easy it felt. The terrifying part was how much she wanted it to be real. 1 week later, meeting the family. They're gonna hate me. Sienna stood in front of Dominic's bathroom mirror, adjusting her dress for the 5th time. It was a deep burgundy sheet that Dominic had insisted on buying. You need to look like family, not staff, and it fit her curves in ways that made her self-conscious. They're going to love you, Dominic called from the bedroom. Eleanor already does. She called you delightfully refreshing when I told her we were engaged. That sounds like a euphemism for completely unsuitable. That sounds like Eleanor speak for, finally, someone who isn't after your money. He appeared in the doorway, adjusting his cufflinks, and stopped. You look beautiful. The compliment hit like a physical thing. It's just a dress. It's not the dress. Their eyes met in the mirror, and for a moment, the pretense fell away. There was just them. Two people staring at each other with complicated want written across their faces. Then Sienna looked away, breaking the spell. We should go. We're already late. The drive to Eleanor's townhouse on the Upper East Side took 20 minutes through holiday traffic. Dominic drove his Aston Martin with the same focused precision he applied to everything, one hand on the wheel, the other resting on the center console. Sienna wanted to reach over, lace her fingers through his like a real fiancé would, but she couldn't tell if that impulse was for show or something more dangerous. Brief me again, she said instead. Who's going to be there? Eleanor, obviously. My sister Natasha flew in from London this morning. She's bringing her wife, Claire. My Uncle Richard and Aunt Margot, though they'll probably leave early. Various cousins I haven't seen in years who will suddenly be fascinated by my personal life. He grimaced. And Veronica. Sienna's stomach dropped. Your ex-fiancée Veronica? It was 5 years ago and lasted 3 months. Hardly a grand romance. You were engaged. I was 29 and stupid, and thought marriage was something you did to check off a life milestone. She agreed because she liked the idea of being Mrs. Ashford more than she liked me. We figured it out before any damage was done. Except now she's going to be at this dinner, watching you with your new fiancé, probably hating me on sight. Probably, he agreed cheerfully. But you're brilliant at handling difficult people. You deal with me daily. Despite her nerves, Sienna laughed. Fair point. They pulled up to the townhouse. 4 stories of pristine brownstone decorated with tasteful white lights and a wreath that probably cost more than Sienna's monthly rent. A valet materialized to take the car. Ready? Dominic asked, coming around to open her door. No. Yes. He offered his hand, helping her out with old-fashioned courtesy that made her heart stutter. Then, before she could process it, he pulled her close, his hand settling on her lower back with possessive ease. Remember, he murmured against her ear, we're madly in love. Try to look like you can tolerate me. That's going to require some serious acting, she whispered back, but she was smiling despite herself. His answering grin was devastating. Come on, wife-to-be. Let's go convince my family we're the real deal. The moment they stepped inside, they were engulfed. Dominic, finally, a stunning woman with Dominic's dark eyes and a pixie cut, rushed forward, practically tackling him with a hug. You absolute idiot. Getting engaged without telling your own sister. Natasha, you were in London. FaceTime exists. Video calls. Technology. But she was laughing, squeezing him tight before turning to Sienna with undisguised curiosity. And you must be the miracle worker who finally got my brother to commit to something besides quarterly earnings reports. Sienna Clark, she managed, extending her hand. Natasha ignored it, pulling her into a hug instead. Oh, we're family now. No handshakes. I'm so glad he found you. Do you have any idea how worried I've been? He's been married to that company for so long. I thought I'd never get to be an aunt. Tasha, Dominic warned, but there was affection in his voice. What? I'm just saying. She looped her arm through Sienna's, steering her deeper into the house. Come on, I'll protect you from piranhas. Though fair warning, Eleanor's already planning your wedding. Richard's going to interrogate you about your intentions. And Veronica's going to be passive-aggressively pleasant. In that way, that makes you want to strangle her with her own pearls. Natasha, a blonde woman, appeared, elegant and amused. Stop terrorizing the poor girl. I'm Claire, the wife, the voice of reason, the only person who can control this chaos. No one can control me, Natasha declared, but she was grinning. Sienna found herself swept into the drawing room, a stunning space of cream walls and antique furniture, where about 20 people mingled with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Conversations paused as they entered. Eyes turned, assessed. Everyone, Natasha announced with theatrical flair. Meet Sienna, my brother's impeccable taste in women despite his terrible taste in everything else. Polite laughter. Curious stares. And then Eleanor rose from her throne-like chair by the fireplace, leaning on that diamond-studded cane, her gaze sharp as she approached. So, the matriarch said, stopping before Sienna with regal bearing, "You're the girl who's stolen my grandson's heart." Sienna's mouth went dry. This was the moment. Pass this test or fail everything. "Actually, Mrs. Ashford," she heard herself say, "I think he stole mine first. I just had the good sense to steal it back." Silence. Then Eleanor laughed, a genuine, delighted sound. "Oh, I like you. You got spine. Good. Dominic needs someone who won't let him bulldoze him into submission." She turned to Dominic, who'd appeared at Sienna's side, his hand finding her waist with easy possessiveness. "You've done well, darling boy. Don't screw it up. I'll try my best, grandmother. See that you do." Eleanor's eyes dropped to the ring on Sienna's finger, and something soft flickered across her face. "My daughter's ring. Your mother would have loved her, you know. Would have loved that you chose someone real over those vapid socialites you've been wasting time with." The words hit Sienna like a gut punch. Real. If only Eleanor knew how fake this all was. "Thank you," she managed. "That means everything." The evening blurred after that. A carousel of introductions, questions, well-wishes that felt both genuine and invasive. Dominic stayed close, his hand always finding hers, his body language protective and attentive in ways that made her forget they were acting, until Veronica approached. She was exactly what Sienna expected, blonde, polished, dressed in an ice blue gown that probably cost 5 figures. Her smile was practiced perfection. "Dominic," she purred, air kissing near his cheek. "Congratulations on your engagement. How sudden." "Veronica, good to see you." His tone was polite but cool. "This is Sienna, my fiancée." "Your assistant, you mean?" Veronica's blue eyes assessed Sienna, like she was evaluating a piece of furniture. "I remember you, always hovering with files and coffee." How convenient that proximity turned into romance. The dig was subtle but sharp. "Actually," Sienna said, keeping her voice pleasant, "I prefer to think of it as 2 people who saw past professional roles to discover something real, though I suppose that's easier for some than others." Dominic coughed to cover a laugh. Veronica's smile went brittle. "Well, how modern. I'm sure you'll be very happy together." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper meant for Sienna alone. "Word of advice, dear. Dominic Ashford doesn't do commitment. He does contracts. I'd read the fine print if I were you." Then she swept away, leaving Sienna's heart hammering. "Don't listen to her," Dominic murmured, his thumb tracing circles on her hip in a gesture probably meant to be comforting but sent shivers down her spine. "She's bitter because I broke things off when I realized we had nothing in common beyond matching china patterns." "Did you love her?" The question escaped before Sienna could stop it. Too personal. Too revealing. Dominic turned her to face him, his expression serious. "No, I didn't. I've never—" He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you." The words hung between them, loaded with meaning Sienna couldn't quite parse. Was he still acting? Was this for the benefit of anyone watching? Or was there something else beneath the surface? "Dominic, there you are." Eleanor's voice cut through the moment. "Come, both of you. Dinner is served, and I want Sienna seated next to me. I have questions. The meal was magnificent and torturous. Eleanor grilled Sienna on everything. Her childhood, her education, her interests, her intentions toward her grandson. Sienna answered as honestly as she could while maintaining the fiction, finding unexpected common ground with the formidable matriarch. Eleanor loved classic literature. So did Sienna. She'd started a foundation for underprivileged youth. Sienna had volunteered at a similar program through college. She valued authenticity over pretense. And here Sienna had to swallow guilt with every bite. "You're good for him," Eleanor said quietly during dessert, her gaze drifting to where Dominic sat a few seats away, deep in conversation with his uncle. He's been lost since his parents died, buried himself in work, convinced that achievement was the same as happiness. But when he talks about you, when he looks at you, I see something I haven't seen in years. "What's that?" Sienna whispered. "Hope." The word detonated in Sienna's chest. Later, after dinner, Dominic found her on the terrace, escaping the warmth and noise for cold December air. "You were brilliant," he said, draping his jacket over her shoulders. "Eleanor's completely charmed. Natasha wants to plan double dates. Even Richard admitted you seem suitable, which is the highest praise he's capable of." "Good." She pulled the jacket tighter, breathing in assent. "That's good. What's wrong?" "Nothing. Just tired. It's a lot, being watched constantly. Performing." He moved closer, his hand finding the small of her back. "I know. I'm sorry. I wouldn't ask if—" "I know. The hospital. Your mother's dream. I understand." She turned to face him, and found him closer than expected, his breath misting in the cold air. "Dominic, what Veronica said is irrelevant." "Is it?" She said, "You don't do commitment, that you do contracts. And isn't that exactly what this is?" His jaw tightened. "This is different." "How?" "Because—" He stopped, frustration flickering across his face. "Because it just is. You're not like her. You're not like any of them. I'm still just an arrangement, a solution to a problem. You're more than that. Am I?" The question hung between them, dangerous and raw. Dominic's hand came up, cupping her face with a gentleness that made her breath catch. "Sienna, there you two are." Natasha's voice shattered the moment. "Sorry to interrupt, but Eleanor wants a family photo, and she's getting cranky about it. Also, Claire and I are leaving tomorrow morning, and I need to hug my brother properly before I go." They pulled apart, the spell broken. But as they walked back inside, Dominic's hand found hers and squeezed once. A brief gesture that somehow felt more intimate than anything that had come before. That night, lying alone in her apartment, Sienna stared at the ring on her finger and let herself cry. Because she was falling. Despite every warning, every boundary, every carefully constructed wall, she was falling for Dominic Ashford. And in 11 days, she'd have to pretend she hadn't. The ceremony was intimate, elegant, and entirely surreal. Sienna stood in the bride's suite at Eleanor's estate, staring at her reflection in a vintage dress that fit like it had been made for her. Because it had. Eleanor had insisted, sending her own personal designer with explicit instructions to create something timeless and romantic, befitting a woman worthy of my grandson. The dress was ivory silk that flowed like water, with delicate lace sleeves and a fitted bodice that made her look like some modern princess. Her dark hair was swept into a loose updo, small white flowers tucked among the curls. She wore her mother's pearl necklace, the only thing of value her father hadn't sold before disappearing 15 years ago. She looked like a bride. She felt like a fraud. "You're beautiful," Claire said softly from the doorway. Natasha's wife had stayed behind when Natasha returned to London 3 days ago for a work emergency, volunteering to help with wedding preparations. In the chaos of planning, she'd become an unexpected friend. "I'm a liar," Sienna whispered. Claire moved closer, adjusting one of the flowers in Sienna's hair with gentle fingers. "Are you? We both know this isn't real." "Do we?" Claire's reflection met Sienna's in the mirror. "Because from where I'm standing, you look like a woman in love. And downstairs, there's a man who's been pacing for the last hour, checking his watch every 30 seconds, looking more nervous than I've ever seen him." He's nervous about the trust, about his grandmother. Is he? Claire smiled. I'm married into this family, remember. I watched Dominic operate for 5 years. And I've never, not once, seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. Sienna's throat tightened. It's not, we agreed. I know what you agreed. I also know that the heart doesn't respect contracts. Claire squeezed her shoulder. Whatever happens after today, know that right now, in this moment, what you're feeling is real. And maybe that's enough. A knock on the door. 5 minutes, Miss Clark. Someone called. Miss Clark. For the last time. In 5 minutes, she'd be Mrs. Ashford. For 3 weeks. She was going to be sick. Breathe, Claire instructed. Just breathe. And remember, this is your wedding day. Whatever brought you here, whatever happens tomorrow, right now you get to marry someone you care about, surrounded by people who are happy for you. That's not nothing. It wasn't nothing. It was everything and nothing all at once. The ceremony was held in Eleanor's conservatory, transformed into a winter wonderland of white flowers, candles, and gentle fairy lights. Only 30 people attended. Immediate family, close friends, a handful of business associates who needed to witness this union for legitimacy. Sienna walked down the makeshift aisle alone. Her mother was too ill to travel, and there was no one else to give her away. But it felt right somehow, claiming this choice as her own. And then she saw Dominic. He stood at the altar in a perfect black tuxedo, his dark hair styled back, his expression unreadable. Nervous? Relieved? Something else she couldn't name. But when their eyes met, something shifted in his face. Softened. And for just a moment, he looked at her like she was everything he'd been waiting for. It was the best acting she'd ever seen. The ceremony was brief. Traditional vows. Do you take this man, do you take this woman for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health? Till death do you part. Such permanent words for such a temporary arrangement. Sienna said, I do, and meant in ways she couldn't afford to examine. Dominic said, I do, and his voice cracked just slightly on the words. You may kiss the bride. This was it. Their first real kiss. They practiced briefly a few days ago. A quick peck, testing boundaries. But this was different. This was witnessed. Official. The moment that would seal their lie. Dominic stepped closer, his hands cupping her face with achingly gentle reverence. Okay, he whispered. Too quiet for anyone else to hear. She nodded, unable to speak. And then he kissed her. It started soft. A brush of lips, chaste and appropriate for an audience. But then something changed. His hand slid into her hair, loosening the careful updo. Her fingers curled into his lapels, pulling him closer. The kiss deepened, became something raw and hungry, and absolutely not appropriate for their grandmother to witness. Someone cleared their throat. They broke apart, both breathing hard, staring at each other with matching shock. That wasn't acting. Applause erupted around them. Cheers. Laughter. But Sienna barely heard it through the roar of blood in her ears. Ladies and gentlemen, the officiant announced, I present to you Mr. and Mrs. Dominic Ashford. Mrs. Ashford. The name settled over her like a brand. The reception was a blur of champagne toasts and well wishes. Eleanor crying genuine tears. Richard grudgingly admitting they made a handsome couple. Veronica watching from across the room with an expression Sienna couldn't decipher. And Dominic, always close, his hand on her waist or holding hers, his attention focused on her with laser intensity that made her dizzy. Dance with me, he murmured during dinner, pulling her onto the small dance floor where a string quartet played something slow and romantic. His arms came around her, one hand splayed across her lower back, the other holding her left hand where the wedding band now sat next to her engagement ring. They swayed in perfect rhythm, close enough that she could feel his heartbeat. You're good at this, she whispered. At dancing. At pretending. His arms tightened fractionally. Is that what you think I'm doing? Aren't you, Sienna? He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. That kiss was for show. I know. Was it? Her heart stopped. Don't what? Don't make this harder than it has to be. We had an agreement. Clean. Professional. No emotional entanglement. And if I want to renegotiate, the same words from that terrible moment on the staircase. But that was in the future or the past, depending on perspective. Right now. They were in the middle of it all, spinning in dangerous circles on a dance floor while their future imploded around them. You can't, she said firmly. The contract. Fuck the contract. The curse made her stumble. Dominic never cursed. He was measured, controlled, the master of his emotions. Except right now, staring down at her with something blazing in his eyes that looked terrifyingly like longing. I can't do this, she whispered, pulling away. I need air. She fled before he could stop her, navigating to a crowd with practiced smiles, escaping to the terrace where the December cold hit like a slap. She was hyperventilating, panicking. This was supposed to be simple. Business. A transaction that benefited them both. When had it become this complicated tangle of want and lies? Sienna? She spun to find Claire in the doorway, wrapped in a shawl. I'm fine, Sienna lied. You're having a panic attack at your own wedding reception. That's decidedly not fine. Claire moved closer, her voice gentle. What happened? He kissed me. And it wasn't fake. Or maybe it was, and I just wanted it to be real so badly that I imagined. The words tumbled out in a rush. I'm such an idiot. This was supposed to be simple. Love is never simple. It's not love. It's a business arrangement. Is it? Claire tilted her head. Because from where I'm standing, you two look like every other couple in love I've ever seen. Except you're both too terrified to admit it. He doesn't love me. He can't. He told me. No emotional entanglement. Those were his exact words. People say a lot of things when they're scared. Doesn't make them true. Claire squeezed her hand. Whatever you're feeling, whatever he's feeling, maybe it's worth exploring instead of running from. And risk everything? My job, my stability, my heart? Sometimes the biggest risk is not taking one at all. Before Sienna could respond, the terrace door opened again. Dominic stepped out, his jacket discarded, his tie loosened, looking rumpled and worried and devastatingly handsome. I'll give you two some privacy, Claire said, slipping past him with a knowing look. Then they were alone. I'm sorry, Dominic said immediately. I shouldn't have said that. About the contract. I was out of line. Were you lying? He froze. What? When you said fuck the contract. When you implied you wanted more. Were you lying? A long moment passed. Snow began to fall, gentle flakes drifting through the darkness. No, he finally said. I wasn't lying. The admission hung between them like a grenade. Then what do you want? She demanded, her voice breaking. Because you can't have it both ways, Dominic. You can't ask me to pretend and then blur the lines and expect me to just know which version is real. All of it, he said roughly. I want all of it to be real. Her breath caught. He moved closer, snow dusting his dark hair. You asked me in the car when I started feeling something. I told you 6 months ago. But the truth is, I've been falling for you since the day you started. Every smart comment, every time you anticipated my needs, every moment you pushed back when I was being an ass, I just didn't let myself acknowledge it. Why not? Because you worked for me. Because I'd built my entire life on control and boundaries. Because I was terrified that if I admitted how I felt, you'd leave and I'd lose the one person who made my life make sense. He was close enough to touch now, his eyes desperate. The contract, the arrangement, my grandmother's ultimatum, it gave me an excuse, a way to have you close without risking rejection. But somewhere along the way, pretending stopped being enough. Tears streamed down Sienna's face. You can't say these things. Why not? Because in 10 days, this ends. We signed an agreement. We set a timeline. This was supposed to be temporary. Then let's change it. Let's make it permanent. You don't mean that. I've never meant anything more. His hands came up, cradling her face like she was something precious. Sienna, I know I've done this backward. I know I've hurt you by hiding behind contracts. But I'm done pretending. I'm done acting. I love you. Really, truly, terrifyingly love you. And if you feel even a fraction of that back, I do, she sobbed. God help me, I do. But that makes this worse, don't you see? Because when this ends, when we divorce, we don't have to. We could stay married. Make this real. People don't do that. People don't accidentally fall in love while fake married. Why not? Stranger things have happened. In romance novels, not in real life. Then maybe, he said softly, his thumb brushing away her tears, we're living in a romance novel, and maybe that's not the worst thing in the world. Despite everything, she laughed, a broken, desperate sound. This is insane. Completely. We're going to regret this. Probably. Dominic. He kissed her, soft and sweet and achingly tender, like she was something infinitely precious. And Sienna kissed him back, pouring 2 years of longing and 3 weeks of confusion and 10 minutes of terrified hope into the gesture. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead to hers. Stay with me, he whispered. After Christmas, after the trust, after everything. Just stay. And Sienna, despite every rational voice screaming that this was a terrible idea, heard herself say, Okay, okay, okay. His smile was blinding. You mean it? I mean, we should talk about this. Figure out logistics. Renegotiate terms. He silenced her with another kiss. Later, right now, I just want to dance with my wife. My wife. The words shouldn't have made her heart sore. But they did. Christmas Eve, 1 week later. The past week had been simultaneously the best and most confusing of Sienna's life. They'd settled into married life with surprising ease. Dominic's penthouse became theirs. Separate bedrooms, as initially agreed, though they spent most evenings tangled together on the couch, talking until midnight, learning each other beyond the office, beyond the performance. She discovered he was terrible at cooking, but determined to try. That he had a weakness for old black and white movies. That he called his mother's grave every Sunday and told her about his week. He learned about her mother's illness, the medical bills she'd been drowning under, the guilt she carried about taking his money even as it saved her family. He insisted on paying for experimental treatment, wouldn't hear her protests. We're married, he'd said simply. Your family is my family now. They hadn't talked about what happened after, hadn't revisited the contract or discussed making things permanent. It was like they'd entered some unspoken agreement to just exist in this bubble for as long as possible. But the bubble was about to burst. Tonight was Eleanor's annual Christmas Eve gala. 200 guests. The formal announcement about the trust. The moment everything either solidified into reality or exploded spectacularly. You ready? Dominic appeared in her bedroom doorway, a boundary they still respected. Barely. Looking devastating in his tuxedo. Sienna smoothed her emerald gown, the one that had gotten torn during their fight. Except they hadn't had that fight yet. That came later, after everything imploded. Time was a strange thing, looping back on itself. Ready as I'll be, she managed. They arrived at the estate to find it transformed. Thousands of lights, a massive Christmas tree, evergreen garlands and red ribbons everywhere. Elegant and festive and absolutely terrifying. The evening started perfectly. They mingled, accepted congratulations, played the devoted couple with ease, because it wasn't playing anymore. Dominic kept touching her, small gestures, unconscious and constant, his hand on her lower back, fingers brushing her wrist, leaning down to whisper private comments that made her laugh. You're staring, she murmured during dinner. Can't help it. You're beautiful. You're biased. Completely? He pressed a kiss to her temple, and utterly unrepentant about it. After dinner, Eleanor stood, tapping her champagne glass for attention. Thank you all for coming tonight, the matriarch began. As many of you know, this has been a year of change for our family. My grandson, who I'd worried would never settle down, has found love with a remarkable woman. Applause. Sienna's cheeks heated. Dominic's parents would have adored Sienna. Eleanor continued, her voice thickening with emotion. Would have loved seeing their son happy, building a life with someone who values love over legacy. And so tonight, I'm pleased to announce that the family trust will remain with Dominic. Support his work and, I hope, providing for the children he and Sienna will have. More applause. Dominic squeezed Sienna's hand under the table. But more importantly, Eleanor added, I want to thank you, Sienna, for bringing my grandson back to life, for showing him that success isn't just measured in contracts and companies. Here's to your marriage, your love, and your future together. The toast rippled through the room. Glasses clinked. And Sienna felt the weight of their lives settling over her like a shroud. Because none of this was real. The trust, the timeline, the 3-week arrangement. It all suddenly felt impossibly fake, even though her feelings had stopped being fake weeks ago. I need air, she whispered to Dominic. His brow furrowed. Are you all right? Just overwhelmed. I'll be back. She fled before he could insist on joining her, escaping to the grand staircase where she could breathe. But breathing didn't help. Nothing helped, because the truth was settling into her bones with terrible clarity. She'd fallen in love with her fake husband, and no amount of renegotiating or hoping could change the fact that this entire foundation was built on lies. His grandmother thought they were real. His family believed in them. Even Dominic seemed convinced they could just transition seamlessly from fake to real without consequences. But what happened when the initial contract expired? What happened when reality set in and he realized he'd gotten caught up in the fantasy? What happened when he woke up one day and regretted everything? Sienna? Veronica approached, perfect as always in blood-red silk. Enjoying your victory lap? The woman asked, her smile sharp. I don't know what you mean. Please. You landed the biggest fish in Manhattan. Dominic Ashford, married and domesticated. It's quite impressive, really. I underestimated you. Sienna straightened her spine. If you have something to say, Veronica, just say it. I'm just curious. She tilted her head, studying Sienna like a specimen under glass. How long did you plan this? When you took the assistant job 2 years ago, was it always the end game? Work your way into his life. Make yourself indispensable. Wait for the perfect opportunity. That's not what happened. Isn't it? I mean, I tried the direct approach. Dating, engagement, the traditional route. But you were smarter. You went for the long game. Brilliant, really. You don't know anything about us. Don't I? Veronica leaned closer, her voice dropping. I know Dominic Ashford. I know he doesn't do spontaneous. I know his grandmother's been threatening that trust fund ultimatum for years. And I know that 3 weeks ago, he suddenly announced an engagement to his assistant. The same assistant who's been quietly pining for him since day one. Sienna's blood ran cold. I haven't been... Oh, please. I've seen the way you look at him. I saw it 2 years ago at that charity gala, when you were coordinating his schedule, watching him dance with me like your heart was breaking. You think I didn't notice? Even if that were true, it doesn't mean... It means you took advantage of a desperate situation. Eleanor issues an ultimatum. And suddenly the convenient assistant transforms into a convenient wife. Very neat. Very calculated. Veronica's smile turned cruel. But here's what you haven't considered. What happens when he realizes he didn't choose you? He chose convenience? When the trust is secured and the pressure's off, and he wakes up one morning wondering why he's tied himself to his employee. Each word was a blade, finding vulnerable places Sienna had tried to armor. We love each other, she said, but her voice wavered. Do you? Or do you love the fantasy of him? And does he love you, or does he love the solution you provided? Veronica paused. I'm not trying to be cruel, Sienna. I'm trying to save you from making the mistake I made, believing Dominic Ashford is capable of putting love before logic. He isn't. Eventually, he'll realize this marriage was a business decision, and you'll be left holding a broken heart and a divorce settlement. Why are you telling me this? Because despite what you might think, I'm not a monster. I'm someone who learned a painful lesson about that man. And I'm watching you make the same mistakes I did, believing performance, confusing proximity with intimacy, thinking you're special when really you're just there. Veronica walked away, leaving Sienna trembling against the railing. You're just there, the words echoed through her skull. finding every insecurity she tried to bury. Was that all she was? Convenient? The solution to a problem that happened to be within arm's reach? Sienna? Dominic's voice came from below. What are you doing up here? She looked down to see him at the base of the stairs, his expression concerned. And suddenly, she couldn't breathe. Couldn't think past Veronica's accusations, and Eleanor's toast, and the weight of all these lies. I can't do this, she heard herself say. Can't do what? Any of it. This. Us. The pretending. His face went carefully blank. We're not pretending anymore. You know that. Do I? She descended a few steps, her voice rising. Because from where I'm standing, nothing's actually changed. We're still living under the terms of that original contract. Still following the timeline. Still. That's not true. You know how I feel about you. Do I? Or do I just know what you've said in the heat of the moment, when it's convenient, when it served the narrative? Sienna, that's not fair, isn't it? She was on the landing now, close enough to see the hurt in his eyes. Tell me something, Dominic. If your grandmother hadn't issued that ultimatum, if there was no trust fund at stake, would you have ever told me how you felt? Would we be here right now? The pause was damning. I don't know, he admitted quietly. Maybe not, but that doesn't mean. It means everything. Her voice cracked. It means this entire relationship is built on a foundation of desperation and convenience. You needed a wife. I needed money. We convince ourselves our feelings were real when maybe they're just a side effect of proximity and pressure. You don't believe that. Don't I? Tears burned her eyes. What happens in 2 days when the contract expires? When the trust is secured and the performance is over? Do we just seamlessly transition into a real marriage? Pretend the last 3 weeks weren't orchestrated. Yes. His frustration was palpable now. That's exactly what we do. Because what started as an arrangement became something real. Somewhere between the contract and now, we fell in love. Why is that so hard to accept? Because love shouldn't come with an expiration date, written into a legal document. She was crying openly now, not caring who might see. Because every time you touch me, I wonder if you're doing it because you want to or because someone's watching. Because when you say you love me, I hear Eleanor's ultimatum and Veronica's warnings and my own pathetic desperation to believe I could ever be more than just convenient. The words hung in the air, raw and devastating. Dominic stared at her like she'd struck him. Is that really what you think? That you're just convenient? I don't know what to think anymore. Then let me clarify. He climbed the stairs, closing the distance between them with determined strides. You are not convenient. You're the most inconvenient thing that's ever happened to me. You disrupted my carefully controlled life, made me feel things I swore I'd never feel, forced me to confront the fact that all my success meant nothing without someone to share it with. Dominic. No, listen. You want to know if I would have told you without the ultimatum? Maybe not. Maybe I'm that much of a coward. But that doesn't make what I feel any less real. It doesn't change the fact that waking up next to you, even in separate bedrooms, has been the best week of my life. It doesn't change the fact that when I think about the contract expiring, I don't feel relief. I feel terror. Because what if you leave? What if this really was just a transaction for you? It wasn't, she whispered. That's the problem. It stopped being a transaction the moment I said yes. Maybe even before that. Then why are we fighting? Because I'm scared. The admission burst out of her. I'm terrified that this is too good to be true. That any minute you'll realize you don't actually want me, and I'll be left with nothing but a broken heart and a check I accepted to sell my dignity. The money isn't about the money anymore. It's about the fact that there's a price tag on this relationship. That we started with a contract instead of a connection. That everything we built sits on a foundation of lies. Glass shattered. Sienna hadn't realized she'd been gesturing wildly until her hand connected with a champagne flute on the railing, sending it crashing to the marble below. And suddenly they were back where we started. In that moment on the staircase, the night crystallizing around them, everything broken and exposed. You think you can just walk away? Dominic's voice was rough with desperation. After everything, after this? Everything. Her laugh was bitter. You mean the pretending? The acting? The contract that said I'd smile and hold your hand and play the devoted wife for 3 weeks while you secured your inheritance. They were spiraling now, circular and destructive, each word cutting deeper than the last. And below them, 200 guests mingled in oblivious ignorance while the fairy tale imploded on the stairs above. That's not fair, Dominic said, moving toward her. You know it became more than that. You know it, Sienna. Do I? Because all I know is what you told me 3 weeks ago in her office. It's purely professional, Miss Clark. A business arrangement. No emotions, no complications, no strings. Those were your exact words, Dominic. Your one condition. The words from that first meeting came back to haunt them. The promises they'd made, the boundaries they'd drawn, the illusion that they could keep their hearts out of this equation. That was before he stopped himself, jaw clenching. Before what? She demanded. Before you kissed me in front of your family? Before you held me while we danced? Before you whisper my name like... She couldn't finish. Couldn't voice the intimacy they'd shared. The moments that had felt so real she'd almost believed them. Someone started playing Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas below. The irony was crushing. Before I realized I was in love with you, Dominic finished quietly. Before I understood that no contract, no condition, no amount of logic could change the fact that you become the most important person in my life. Sienna's heart cracked. Don't what? Don't make this harder than it has to be. We had an agreement. Clean. Professional. No emotional entanglement. And if I want to renegotiate? There was again the same offer from the terrace. The same desperate plea for something neither of them knew how to build. You can't, she whispered. The contract. Fuck the contract. Mr. Ashford? Veronica's voice echoed up the staircase, perfectly timed to destroy any chance at resolution. Your grandmother is asking for you and your wife. She wants to make the announcement about the trust. Reality crashed back. The performance. The trust. The entire reason they were here. I can't do this, Sienna said, gathering her torn skirt. I can't go down there and keep lying. Not to them. Not to myself. Sienna? Don't. She held up her hand. You want to know what your real mistake was, Dominic? It wasn't the contract or the conditions or any of this insane plan. It was thinking I could spend 3 weeks falling for you and then just walk away unscathed when it was over. The confession hung between them, raw as an open wound. His expression transformed. Shock melting into something that looked like hope, like agony, like every complicated emotion she felt reflected back. You fell for me? It doesn't matter. Her voice shook. Because in 10 minutes, you're going to go downstairs, collect your $30 million trust fund, and I'm going to disappear back into my real life. Back to being your assistant who filed your papers and scheduled your meetings and was stupid enough to say yes when her billionaire boss asked her to pretend to be his wife for Christmas. Mr. Ashford? Veronica called again, closer now. They're waiting. The grandfather clock in the hall began to chime. Midnight approached. Christmas Day. The moment when everything would either solidify into permanence or dissolve into nothing. Dominic's hand finally made contact, his fingers curving around her wrist with desperate gentleness. What if I told you I don't want the money? What if I told you that somewhere between our first fake smile and tonight, I stopped acting? Sienna's eyes burned. Then I'd say you're 3 weeks too late with the truth. She pulled away, but he followed, his voice dropping to that rough whisper that always unraveled her. Sienna, please, let me explain. Let me tell you why I asked you. Let me tell you about the real condition. The one I never said out loud because I was too much of a coward to admit what I already felt. What you felt. The tears spilled over. When you hired me 2 years ago and barely noticed I existed. When you dated Victoria and Sophia and half of Manhattan, while I stayed late organizing your social calendar. When exactly did you start feeling something, Dominic? The accusations cut through the air. Every suppressed hurt from 2 years of loving him in silence finally finding voice. 6 months ago, he said quietly, That's when her breath hitched. What? You asked when I started feeling something. 6 months ago. The Nakamura merger. Do you remember? The memory crashed over her. 70-hour weeks, endless coffee, that sunrise moment when everything had shifted imperceptibly. You brought me coffee at 3 in the morning. Dominic continued, his voice rough with memory. But it wasn't just coffee. You'd noticed I'd been rubbing my temples all night, so you'd added that peppermint oil that helps with my headaches. And you printed out the revised contracts with the corrections I'd mentioned in passing 6 hours earlier, organized in the exact order I needed them. And when I looked up to thank you, you were standing by the window, looking out at the city, and the sunrise was just starting to break through the darkness. She remembered. God, she remembered every detail. The way the light had caught on the buildings, the exhaustion making everything feel dreamlike, the moment she turned and caught him staring. You turned around and smiled at me, he whispered, stepping closer. Not your professional smile. Not your efficient assistant smile. Just you, tired and real, and so beautiful it stopped my heart. And you said, "We're going to win this, Mr. Ashford. I can feel it." And in that moment I knew. Knew what? The words barely escaped her constricted throat. That I was in serious trouble. That my reliable, brilliant, indispensable assistant had somehow become the one person I couldn't stop thinking about. The one person I wanted to see first thing every morning and last thing every night. The one person who made me believe that maybe, just maybe, I could be more than the cold, calculating businessman everyone thought I was. Sienna's world tilted, but you never said anything. You never. Because you work for me, he cut in, frustration and longing warring in his expression. Because I built my entire career on control and professionalism and clear boundaries. Because I knew the power imbalance made it impossible. And because I was terrified that if I told you how I felt, you'd leave, and I'd lose the best thing in my life even if I could never really have you. So you asked me to fake marry you instead? The hurt bled through. That was your solution? No. He moved closer until only inches separated them. That was my mistake. My grandmother's ultimatum about the trust. Get married by Christmas or lose everything. It gave me an excuse. A way to have you close without risking rejection. But the condition, Sienna, the real condition I never voiced, was what? Her hands trembled. That I'd try to make you fall for me. That I'd use these 3 weeks to show you who I really am beneath the suits and the boardrooms. That maybe, just maybe, by the end of Christmas, you'd want to stay, not because of a contract, but because you'd fallen for me too. The confession detonated between them. Mr. Ashford. Veronica's voice had gone shrill. This is ridiculous. Your grandmother is going to have to wait, Dominic said without breaking eye contact with Sienna. Because I'm not going down there until Sienna tells me if I've lost her forever or if there's still a chance. Sienna opened her mouth, closed it. Words failed in the face of everything swirling through her chest. Love and fear and desperate, aching hope. But before she could form a response, Eleanor's voice cut through the chaos. Dominic? Sienna? The matriarch stood at the base of the stairs, leaning on her cane, her steel gray eyes sharp. I think it's time we all had a conversation. A real one. No more games. No more pretending. Come down here. Both of you. Now. The command left no room for argument. They descended together, hands not quite touching, the space between them charged with everything unsaid. Eleanor waited until they reached her, then pinned Sienna with unexpected gentleness. You love him, she said simply. Not a question. Sienna's walls crumbled. Yes. And you? Eleanor turned to Dominic. Love her? More than I knew was possible. Eleanor nodded once. Good. Then perhaps we can finally stop the charade and deal with the real problem. Real problem? Dominic frowned. Grandmother, what are you talking about? Eleanor's smile was mysterious, knowing. The trust, darling boy. Did you really think I'd give you $30 million just for getting married? I'm many things, but a fool isn't one of them. I knew from the moment you announced your sudden engagement to your assistant that something was amiss. Sienna's stomach dropped. You knew? My dear girl, I didn't build an empire by being oblivious to human nature. But what I needed to know, what I've been testing these past 3 weeks, was whether you two would be brave enough to stop hiding behind contracts and conditions and admit what was really happening between you. The pieces clicked into place with stunning clarity. The family dinners, the couple's activities, the pointed questions. Eleanor had been watching, waiting, orchestrating. So the money, Dominic started, was always yours, Eleanor finished. But not because you got married. Because you found something infinitely more valuable than wealth. You found someone who sees you, truly sees you, and loves you anyway. Someone who challenges you, supports you, makes you better. That's the real inheritance I wanted you to have. Sienna felt tears streaming down her face. Mrs. Ashford, Eleanor, please. We're family now. Or we will be, once you two stop being stubborn and figure out that real love doesn't come with conditions. It just is. The ballroom had gone silent. Every guest watched this drama unfold with rapt attention. Dominic turned to Sienna, his hand finding hers with trembling urgency. I know I've done this backward. I know I've hurt you by hiding behind contracts and fear. But I'm done pretending. I'm done with conditions. Sienna Clark, Sienna Ashford, I love you, not because it's convenient or logical or part of some arrangement. I love you because you're you. And if you'll give me another chance, a real one, with no contracts or timelines or escape clauses, I swear I'll spend the rest of my life proving it. The words hung in the crystalline air, perfect and terrifying. Sienna looked at him, really looked, at the man beneath the billionaire facade, the one who called his mother's grave, the one who couldn't cook but tried anyway, the one who'd given her 3 weeks of fairy tale and then offered forever. No more contracts, she whispered. No more contracts. No more conditions? Well, his mouth curved. Maybe one. Her heart stuttered. What? That you promise to keep correcting me when I'm being an ass. That you keep bringing me coffee at 3 a.m. with peppermint oil. That you keep being exactly who you are, brilliant and stubborn and real in a world full of people who are anything but. His voice dropped. That you keep loving me, even when I don't deserve it. That's 3 conditions. I'm renegotiating. Despite everything, the tears, the fear, the shattered champagne, Sienna laughed. You're impossible. Is that a yes? She looked at Eleanor, watching with barely concealed satisfaction. At the guests, witnessing this moment. At Veronica, standing in the corner with an expression caught between bitterness and something that might have been grudging respect. Then back to Dominic, waiting for her answer with his heart in his eyes. Yes, she said. It's a yes. To all of it. The conditions, the complications. The terrifying leap into unknown territory. Yes. His smile was incandescent. You mean it? I mean I'm done pretending this is fake. I mean I fell for you somewhere between that first contract and this moment, and I don't want to unfeel it. I mean, he kissed her, cutting off her words with lips that tasted like champagne and promises. And Sienna kissed him back, pouring 2 years of longing and 3 weeks of confusion and 1 moment of absolute certainty into the gesture. When they finally broke apart, the ballroom erupted in applause. Ladies and gentlemen, Eleanor announced, her voice carrying across the room, I present to you, again, Mr. and Mrs. Dominic Ashford. This time for real. More applause. Cheers. Someone popped another bottle of champagne. And as midnight struck and Christmas Day officially began, Sienna stood in her husband's arms. Her real husband now, in every way that mattered, and let herself believe in fairy tales. Even the ones that started with contracts and conditions and one impossible request. 1 year later. Christmas Eve. You're staring again. Sienna glanced up from the contract spread across the coffee table. Her coffee table now, in the penthouse they'd renovated together. To find Dominic watching her with that soft expression that still made her heart race. Can't help it, he said, echoing words from a year ago. You're beautiful. I'm in sweatpants with my hair in a messy bun, working on Christmas Eve. And you're still the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. She threw a pen at him. He caught it, grinning. A year. They'd been married, really married, For a year. And every day felt like both a continuation of that initial 3-week fairy tale and something entirely new. Real. Theirs. They'd renegotiated everything. Not through contracts this time, but through conversations. Late night talks about boundaries and fears and hopes. Therapy sessions to work through the complicated foundation their relationship had been built on. Hard discussions about power dynamics and whether she could truly remain his assistant turned business partner without resentment festering. She'd chosen to step into a new role, VP of Operations, with actual authority and a salary that reflected her worth rather than convenience. They kept their relationship out of the office as much as possible, but everyone knew, and surprisingly, no one cared. Success had a way of making people forgive unconventional origins. Her mother's treatment was working. She'd actually joined them for Thanksgiving, healthy enough to travel, cry when she met Dominic, and whisper in Sienna, "He loves you so much, sweetheart. I can see it in everything he does." The children's hospital wing, her mother-in-law's dream project, had broken ground in September. They'd attended the ceremony together, and Sienna had watched Dominic place the first brick with tears streaming down his face. "What are you thinking about?" he asked now, abandoning his own work to move beside her on the couch. "How different this Christmas is from last year. Better or worse?" She pretended to consider. "Well, last year I had a fake husband who was emotionally constipated and communicated primarily through contracts. This year I have a real husband who's only slightly less emotionally constipated and occasionally uses his words." "Occasionally? You're improving." He pulled her against him, and she went willingly, tucking herself into the space that had become hers over the past year. Under his arm, her head on his chest, their legs tangled together. For the record, he murmured against her hair, "This is infinitely better. Last year, I was terrified you'd figure out I was in love with you and run screaming. This year, I get to tell you, I love you whenever I want, and you can't escape." "Who says I can't escape?" "The legal document that says, 'Till death do us part.'" "Oh, right. That." They sat in comfortable silence, watching snow fall beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. Manhattan glittered with holiday lights, beautiful and chaotic and home. "Sienna? MM? I want to renegotiate again." Her heart skipped. After a year, those words still triggered a Pavlovian response. Half anxiety, half anticipation. "What now?" "The separate bedrooms thing. I think we should eliminate that clause." She pulled back to look at him. They'd maintained separate spaces despite being married, despite sleeping in the same bed most nights anyway. It had felt important, maintaining some boundary between their rapid-fire romance and the reality they were building. But lately she'd been thinking, "What did you have in mind?" she asked carefully. "Converting your bedroom into a home office, or a nursery, or whatever you want, really. The point is, I don't want separate anymore. I want fully integrated, completely merged. No more hedging our bets." A nursery. The word hung between them, weighted with possibility. "Dominic," she started, too fast. He searched her face. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have." "No," she interrupted. "Not too fast. Just, are you sure? We've only been really married for a year." "Sienna, I was sure the moment you walked down that aisle in Eleanor's conservatory. I was sure when you stood on that staircase and called me out for hiding behind contracts. I'm sure now, and I'll be sure tomorrow and every day after." His hand came up, cupping her face. "I want everything with you. The boring parts and the exciting parts. The easy days and the hard ones. Kids who inherit your brilliance and my stubborn streak. Growing old together in this penthouse, arguing about whose turn it is to make coffee." Tears pricked her eyes. "That's a terrible sales pitch. You're awful at coffee. Then you'll make it, and I'll worship you for it. Do we have a deal?" "No contracts." "No contracts. Just us, figuring it out as we go." Sienna thought about the past year, the stumbles and successes, the moments she doubted, and the moments she'd been absolutely certain. The way he'd held her through panic attacks about not being good enough. The way she'd held him through grief on the anniversary of his parents' death. The way they built something real from a foundation of lies. "Okay, she said softly. Okay, let's do it. Merge the bedrooms. Talk about kids. Build a life that doesn't have escape clauses or expiration dates. His smile was blinding. You mean it? I mean, I'm all in. No more hedging bets. No more wondering if this is too good to be true. Just us, whatever that looks like. I love you, he said, and she heard the echo of a year ago. The same words, the same desperate certainty, now tempered with time and proof. I love you too, she replied. Even though you tricked me into this with an insane contract and a 3-week timeline and conditions that made no sense. Best business decision I ever made. Worst negotiation I ever agreed to. And yet here we are. Here we are. He kissed her, soft and sweet and achingly familiar. And when he pulled back, his eyes were serious. Thank you, he whispered. For what? For saying yes. That first time in my office. For taking a chance on a desperate billionaire with terrible emotional communication skills and a tendency to hide behind contracts. For falling in love with me despite every logical reason not to. For staying when you could have walked away. Dominic. She pressed her hand to his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady beneath her palm. You gave me everything. Security for my mother. A career I love. A family I'd never dreamed of having. But more than that, you gave me you. The real you, beneath all the walls and armor. That's not something I'd walk away from. Even when I'm impossible? Especially then. They sat wrapped together as midnight approached. Another Christmas Eve, another moment of transition. But this time, there was no uncertainty. No contracts or conditions or carefully constructed facades. Just two people who'd stumbled into love the messiest way possible and somehow made it work. Oh, Dominic said suddenly, pulling away to dig something from his pocket. I almost forgot. I have something for you. We said no gifts this year. It's not exactly a gift. More like a symbolic gesture. He handed her a folded piece of paper. Sienna opened it, her breath catching as she recognized a contract they'd signed a year ago. The one that had started everything. Except now, someone had drawn a thick red line through every clause. Through the payment terms and the timeline, and the conditions about emotional entanglement. And at the bottom, in Dominic's familiar handwriting, new words had been added. Contract amendment, dated Christmas Eve, 1 year later. All previous terms are hereby void. New terms as follows. 1. Party A Dominic. Promises to love Party B, Sienna, for the rest of his life, without conditions, timelines, or escape clauses. 2. Party B promises the same, assuming Party A continues to be tolerable. 3. Both parties agree that what started as a convenient arrangement has become inconveniently perfect. 4. This contract expires never. Signed, your impossible husband. Tears blurred Sienna's vision. You're such a sap. You love it. I really do. She tucked the paper carefully into her pocket. A reminder of where they'd started, where they'd struggled, and where they'd ended up. Outside, church bells began to chime. Midnight. Christmas Day. Merry Christmas, wife, Dominic murmured. Merry Christmas, husband. And as they kissed beneath the twinkling lights of their Christmas tree, the one they decorated together, arguing playfully about ornament placement, Sienna thought about fairy tales. About how they never started with once upon a time in real life. How they started with desperate requests and impossible contracts and one terrified woman, saying yes to 3 weeks of pretending. How they grew through mistakes and miscommunication and moments of stark, painful honesty. How they endured through the hard work of loving someone despite and because of their flaws, and how they lived on, not in perfect happiness, but in the beautiful, messy, complicated reality of two imperfect people choosing each other every single day. No conditions, no contracts, just love. And really, what better way to celebrate Christmas than that? The end.